Over the past 15 years, Oklahoma City has averaged 61.8 homicides per year. But this year, as of December 17, 2015, there have been 87 homicides in Oklahoma City. That puts 2015 in the top 5 since 1972. The 87 homicides are up from 62 last year and 76 in 2013. Yet 2012 saw 99 homicides. So why the fluctuation, and why have there been more homicides this year versus last year? Here to discuss the numbers and what they might indicate from the Oklahoma City Police Department, Captain Paco Balderrama. Thank you, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just start off with the obvious question here. The homicide numbers are up. Should people fear for their lives? And I say that not in jest as much as we don't want to create a whole lot of hype here. We just want to look at the numbers and what are behind them. But for the average common citizen, what do these numbers indicate?
Well, you know, when you really break it down and look at the numbers and what they involve, no, people don't have to fear for their lives. I mean, 87 is too high. Let me just say that. You know, we want to be a lot lower than that. You know, we would love for it to be 0 every year. But I mean, in a large metropolitan area, that's just not going to happen. And really having numbers that are close to 100 for the population being what it is really pretty average. But once again, 87 is too high.
Oklahoma City area, roughly 1 million. There's about 600,000, I believe, in the actual Oklahoma City area, but the metro area, around 1 million people. What might be the reason behind the higher numbers, and why the fluctuation?
Well, you know, one of the things that we have seen here recently, and keep in mind the year's not done yet. You know, we still got a couple of weeks. But of the 87 homicides that we've had this year, 18 of them, or roughly 21%, are gang related. You know, they either involve gang members, or it was either a drive-by shooting or some type of gang activity. So most people who live here are not part of a gang, obviously, so they would not be involved in that lifestyle. So,
and Captain, we're looking behind us at the map, and there is, it seems like the map, these, by the way, indicate homicides so far in 2015. It seems like this is very reflective of the density population in Oklahoma City. So we do see some south of I-40.
And that's correct. I mean, the closer to the center of the city, that's where the most people are. Where you have the most number of people, you're going to have issues, incidents, fights, domestics, sometimes leading to homicides. So that's one thing to consider. If you look at the outskirts, where some of the nicer, some of the nicer suburbs are, well, you're not going to see that.
Sure. Back to your point on the gang-related and the 18 incidents so far this year. What is the state of gang activity in Oklahoma City? What are you guys seeing?
Well, it goes up and down. You know, what we've seen in the last few years is that it's stayed very steady. We haven't seen a significant increase in gang activity. It's kind of stayed about the same in the last 5 years. But unfortunately, we also haven't seen a reduction in the number of gang members. So, you know, that's one thing that we constantly are monitoring through social media, through criminal intelligence. It's very important for us to keep tabs of who's here, what they're doing, when we do have confirmed gang members, to basically, you know, see what they're up to, see what types of crimes they're committing, so we can stay ahead of that.
And I know Oklahoma City Police Department is heavily involved in social media. Your partner Jennifer Wardlow now heads up a social media part of that. Bill City was in our studios last week. He was telling me off camera about how that's an important part of how you guys mirror your efforts with Crime Stoppers with your Facebook efforts on social media.
It's been an incredibly successful venture to do that, because what we started seeing is that a good percentage of our tips, roughly about 40%, were now coming through social media. You know, people were not willing to pick up the phone and make an anonymous phone call, but they were very willing to get on their smartphone and send us a message, a private message, giving us information. And really using social media to show videos, to show suspect information, has been very, very successful for us.
All right, getting back to these numbers, how many of these homicides take place in a criminal activity?
Quite a few of them. You know, if you consider the gang involvement, which is 18 or 20% of them, robberies attribute to 15 homicides this year. Also, you know, another thing to consider is that most of these are not going to be random acts of violence. You have arguments between two people, domestic related, even child abuse, sadly enough, all contribute to the numbers. That's approximately 36 of them. So these people know each other. Victims of homicides a lot of times know their attacker. So these are not random acts of violence that you know, gang members are going around just victimizing random people. No, it's domestic related people who know each other.
As you mentioned, we're not through 2015 yet, and you guys will be crunching the numbers in January as we get into 2016. I see you have it broken down here: gang-related, robbery, argument, domestic-related, self-defense. Will you crunch those numbers year over to see, okay, we are seeing a rise in gang activity or a rise in domestic-related? Is that some of the things that you guys look at, and then how do you respond to those?
Well, if you look at the one under self-defense, that's 9. 9 of our homicides happen to be self-defense incidents. That's up by 6. We have 6 more homicides this year involving self-defense than we did last year. Well, we think that number is going to either hold steady or maybe even increase. A lot more people are becoming very self-aware of their surroundings, and there's been a lot of talk about arming yourself and taking gun classes and things like that. So we are seeing a rise in the number of firearms in Oklahoma City, and that's people's right. If they want to legally own a gun, they can do that. What concerns us is the increase of the number of illegal firearms on the streets. Our police officers take guns off the streets daily. It used to be every once in a while. Now we're seeing more and more guns, illegal firearms, meaning they were either stolen in a burglary or obtained illegally by a person who has no business owning a firearm, and they're the ones who are in possession of it. And they're using these guns to commit crimes, robberies and homicides. So that's something that is concerning to us. It's just the increased number of guns on the streets.
Let's talk officer-involved shootings. I believe we have 7 so far this year. You guys, in October, revised your use of force. Can you talk about that and the efforts behind that?
Sure. We made it a little bit more specific as far as when an officer can shoot into a moving vehicle. We want our officers to be safe, and we do the best training that we have, best practices in order to teach our officers how to defend themselves and how to defend the public. Now, one of the things that we had to consider is when should a police officer shoot into a moving vehicle. Now, there's been cases where, if an individual is trying to run an officer over, and basically that officer has no place to go, well, that may be his only alternative, is to unholster his weapon and fire the weapon at the person who's trying to run him over. Obviously, that can kill you. But, we're a little bit more specific, where if an officer can basically get out of the way, then we encourage that. Get out of the way. Don't use your firearm unless you have to. And really, when a suspect hits an officer when they're in 2 vehicles and tries to ram the officer, well, we can't consider that exactly a deadly force. So we've come down the scale just a little bit on that particular area, where we encourage officers to use other means in that circumstance.
A lot of training involved in being a police officer, from the physical side, the disarming of suspects, knowing what to do, but then also the psychology of it as well.
Oh yeah, it's a very difficult job. I mean, there's no qualms about it. To be a police officer, you have to wear a lot of hats. You have to make a lot of instant choices, instant decisions, and that's very hard to do. And police officers are very easily criticized. When after an event takes place. Well, you have to consider that officer has sometimes seconds, sometimes really a split second to make a decision whether to use deadly force or not use deadly force. And keep in mind that officer, he's tasked with protecting the public, but also he has to protect himself or herself. And that's something that's very difficult to do. So training is very important. We always look for the best, most up-to-date training. And one thing that we're pushing right now is de-escalation. What we've seen is our contacts with mentally ill individuals has increased over the last 10 years quite a bit, and we handle people who are mentally ill a lot different than we used to. Now when we can identify that a person is really maybe suffering from some kind of a mental episode, then we have alternatives. Instead of taking them to jail, we try to get them some help.
How many officers does Oklahoma City have, and what's the training process? I know you guys have an academy.
Yeah, it's a long training process. Basically, it takes the better part of a year just to go through the hiring process. We have to go back and do background checks on every individual. They have to go through a psychological evaluation to make sure that they're fit, to be a police officer. Once you get into the academy, it's basically 6 months of training. Every day you're training. It's very similar to military training because you're doing physical activity and you're taking all this information in, penal code, self-defense, driving, firearms. It's a lot to take in. Well, once a recruit graduates, then they go to the FDO program, which is a field training program. And that's basically another 4 to 5 months of training before they're ever alone in a police car. So basically it takes the better part of a year and a half just to put a body out there on the streets. Right now we have approximately 1,150 officers. That fluctuates. We have people retire all the time. We're still a little bit short of our allotted manpower, which is, I think we're about 65 short.
Talking with Captain Paco Balderrama with the Oklahoma City Police Department. How did you get involved in the police?
Well, it's something that I wanted to do since I was in high school.
Are you from Oklahoma City?
Originally, I'm from El Paso, Texas,
okay.
And I graduated in 1995 from Grant High School, and it was something that I always wanted to do. We had a school resource officer who was an Oklahoma City police officer there at our high school, Sergeant Max Blumenthal, who was very influential. He was able to inspire us and really kind of drive us down the. When I say me and about 5 of my classmates became police officers out of that class, including my brother. So he was very influential, but it was something that I always wanted to do. I thought that police work was something where I could help others, help society. Great job, exciting. So really, it was the only career I really considered. So that's how I became a police officer. Once I turned 21, I was going to OSU OKC to get my degree, and also working at the Sheriff's Department, which was another great opportunity for me then. So it was just kind of a natural progression of things.
Oklahoma City's changed a bunch since the 90s, hasn't it?
Oh, it's changed quite a bit. I remember as a brand new officer driving through Bricktown. At the time, Bricktown was just a bunch of old brick buildings with some trees, and we even had unpaved streets in there. And to see where it's gone, really in the last 15 years, it's incredible.
I'm sure that affects the way you guys patrol as well. Okay, back to the numbers of the homicides. How many remain unknown and unsolved, and are the numbers you're seeing of those this year typical of?
It's a little higher this year. Basically 11 of them, which is 12%, which is up by 7, are unknown at this time. That's
what
a little bit higher.
qualifies as an unknown?
Well, one that is unsolved. We really don't know the motive of why this homicide took place. We haven't made an arrest or identified the suspect. Basically, we consider that unsolved. But the homicide unit is very elite in our police department. Obviously, we put some of our most experienced and very best detectives in that unit. It has 14 homicide detectives who work very, very hard. Homicides, obviously it's a very important crime. Anything dealing in persons crimes is something that impacts us very much, because we know it affects people's lives. So they do a great job. Really, the solvability rate that we have in Oklahoma City is a lot higher than a lot of other cities.
Any final thing you would like to say to the citizens of Oklahoma City from the police's perspective?
From our perspective, we believe that Oklahoma City is one of the best places to live in the country. It's still very safe. Although homicide numbers may be up a little bit, we know that most of those homicides involve individuals and people who are doing things that are illegal. Bottom line, that does not reflect the vast majority of the population in Oklahoma City. So really, you should feel safe. You should have confidence in the police department that we're doing everything we can to bring those numbers down.
For the record, since 1972, only once have there been more than 100 homicides in a year. There were 102 reported back in 1979. Of course, that doesn't count 1995 and the victims of the Alfred P. Murrah building bombing. Captain, thank you for your time today, and on behalf of us, thanks to the police for your service, and happy holidays to you guys.
Same to you.
Stay safe.
We will.